So the Sony FX2 was just released, and while I wasn't able to personally use it, it actually sounds like a pretty cool camera. In this video, I'm just going to share my thoughts and perspective on the FX2, coming from someone who's been using the Sony FX3 for the past few years now, and I've been loving it. Now, Sony FX2 is not an upgrade to the FX3, it's not trying to be. It has a similar body to the Sony FX3, but now it actually has a built-in viewfinder, which I actually think it's really cool, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. And the Sony FX2 costs about $2,700, while the Sony FX3 costs about $3,900. So that's almost a $1,300 difference, which honestly, that's I think what makes this camera actually interesting to not necessarily someone who has an FX3 already, but to someone who maybe you've been saving up for a new camera and the FX3 is a little out of your price range, but you still want a full frame FX3 type cinema camera, then I feel like the FX2 might be exactly what you're looking for. It doesn't have the same 12 megapixel sensor as the FX3, but it actually has the 33 megapixel sensor from the A7C II and the A7 IV. And I was able to get my hands on and use an A7C II back when it was first released. And one of my biggest issues with that camera is that it did overheat. So while the FX2 is essentially a repackaged A7C II or an A7 IV, it does have an updated cooling system. And from the videos I've seen so far about the FX2, overheating doesn't seem to be an issue anymore. So if you were considering an A7C II, but you don't want to shoot long days and worry about overheating, then you can actually look at something like the FX2 now. The most controversial limitation of the FX2 is that if you do shoot 4K 60 frames per second, it's going to give you a 1.5 times crop, versus the FX3, you can shoot 4K 60 with no crop. And even 4K 60 on my FX3 is something I very rarely use, but when I do, I will admit it does come in handy to switch to 4K 60 and be able to use my full sensor rather than have to crop in. I will say I actually do like the addition of a viewfinder in the FX2. I remember when I was just starting out, I had a Lumix G7 and this camera has a viewfinder, so I loved when I would go handheld, I would just put my eye through the viewfinder and it just felt like a very immersive experience for making short films that way. And for photography, me personally, I prefer to look through a viewfinder. Again, I feel like it just isolates things a little bit and help you focus on your framing. So if you do plan on doing some photo work, I feel like the FX2 would be a little bit more ideal. I have shot a few photos on my FX3, which that 12 megapixel sensor, for posting things to Instagram, it's more than enough. But if you plan on doing some professional photo work, the detail that you're gonna get out of that 33 megapixel sensor will be a little bit better. And a couple years back, I was able to get my hands on the Sony A6700, the Sony A7C II, A7CR during the initial release of all those cameras. Most of those cameras were the same sensor packaged into a smaller, cheaper camera with a couple less features. So personally, I had a negative outlook on them. And I think a lot of people initially are going to look down on the Sony FX2 as well. But I remember 6 to 12 months after that initial release, that's when more people started to get their hands on those cameras and start actually creating things, making narrative films, travel films, commercials, stuff like that with those cameras. That's when the hype started to actually generate and people started to pick up those cameras more. And I feel like that's going to be the same response with the FX2. Right now, creators probably got the camera a week ago or less and had to quickly scrounge up a video, but I think once we start to see people actually creating stuff with the FX2 and creating things that inspire us, I think that's when we're going to start to see more people looking at the FX2 in more of a positive light. And right now we're honestly at a point that every camera that comes out is so good, and it really doesn't matter whether you got an FX2 or an FX3. I think what matters more right now is what you're actually making with that camera. So regardless of your camera, I think the goal is really just to go out and create stuff and share some art and make things. So if there's anything I'd want you to take away from this video, it's just that you should try to make more things and not necessarily spend more time stressing or arguing about specs, because every camera is really, really good right now. Anyways, thank you for listening to this rant. I'll be back to some more regular videos next week, and I can't wait to see you in the next one. Peace.